In the last episode, we talked about how Robert Boville proved that the Giza pyramids are identical to the coal belt, and after extensive research in the pyramid texts, he also proved that the Nile River is identical to the Milky Way, and that the 7 pyramids that extend from Abu Rawash to Dahshur are identical to 7 stars in the sky. He published his findings in a scientific journal and decided to stop there. However, after years of publishing his theory, we entered the early 1990s, a time when personal computers were just starting to appear everywhere. Our friend Robert bought a computer program called Sky Globe, which was used by astronomers to determine the positions of stars at specific times. The program, through a set of calculations, can show you the shape of the constellations and the change in their locations that occurs due to the movement of the Earth. In other words, you can see how the location of the stars will be tomorrow and the day after, and you can see what they will look like after 1,000 years. Through the Sky Globe program, the robot returned to the era known as the era of building the pyramids, which is approximately 2500 BC. But he noticed a strange observation, an observation that made him ask himself, is it possible that the Assyrians made a mistake in determining the age of the pyramids? In the 60s, an important theory came out at the hands of 2 researchers, an Egyptologist named Alexander Badoy and an astronomer named Virginia Trimble. This theory says that it is known that the Great Pyramid has 4 openings called ventilation openings. According to astronomical calculations, they found that the 2 openings in the King's Chamber point to the range of the largest star in the Jordan Belt. The star Al-Sab'an and the 2 openings in the Queen's Chamber refer to the star Al-Sha'ara and the North Star, but what concerns us now is the opening in the King's Chamber. According to the calculations, they found that the star Al-Nitak passed in front of the opening in the King's Chamber in the year 2500 BC, and this is one of the reasons that made some people cling to the date 2500 BC as the date for building the pyramids. You will see this theory in the end. How can I benefit from it? This Sky Globe program is very old and its development has been stopped for a long time, but we will use a similar, more recent program to see what is the strange thing that caught his attention. The program that we will use is called Stellarium. It is free and works on most operating systems such as Windows and Apple. It can show you the shape of the sky and the locations of the stars 100,000 years before or after Christ. It is available in the sources if you want to download it and use it. We'll run the program, and the first thing we'll choose is the location from which you want to see the sky. We'll select the Giza area where the pyramids are located, but you can choose any point in Lower Egypt, which was the site of the ancient capital of Memphis. You can enter the latitude and longitude coordinates that you can get from Google Earth, but I'll tell you in advance that the result won't differ much. To make it easier, we'll choose the Giza area. We are now standing at the pyramids of Giza in 2019. Keep in mind that the program's job is to show you the sky, so it won't show you the pyramids, but it assumes they are in this location. We're going to look towards the south, indicated by the letter S for south. And the constellations are visible in an area called the southern sky. These lines are created by the program to facilitate the identification of the groups. We want to go back in time to 2500 BC. If we look at the years 2500 in the negative, this is what the sky looked like at that time. We can move a bit through the days and months until Orion and the Milky Way appear in front of me. They really appeared in front of me. This is Orion, and this is just a stroke of contrast. This line is known to have an angle of the axis of the pyramids with the horizon of exactly 45 degrees, but from the moment that Robert noticed it in the program, if we imagine that there is a straight line coming out of the opening of the King's Chamber of Peshawar to the star Al-Nitakat, as Badawi and Virginia proved, we will find that the copies of the pyramids are not identical to Orion's belt. That is, they left the opening of the Great Pyramid pointing to the range and did not leave it with the rest of the pyramids. There is a big difference in the angles. If we bring them closer, we will find the angles of inclination clear. Below is the arrangement of the Giza pyramids at an angle of 45 degrees to the horizon, as we said, but the Orion constellation has an angle of approximately 10 degrees, and this is a very big difference. In other words, if the pyramids had been built in 2500 BC, they would not have been built in this way, but they would have been built at an angle of 10 degrees in this way to match Orion. Someone might say they could have built 3 pyramids, and that's it, at any angle. That's why we said there are no mistakes, no randomness. Nothing was built haphazardly or arbitrarily. Everything was subject to a precise design, and the angles they chose were for a specific reason. Now if we move a bit through history, there might be a difference in the years. Let's go to a more recent date, to 2400 BC. we reached before 2000 BC. And there's still a significant difference in the matching angles that shouldn't be happening. So let's try to go further back to 2600 BC. We reached from 3000 BC to 3500 BC, which is the period when Egyptian civilization is supposed to have started in its known form. Yet the matching still doesn't happen. The angles are different. However, Robert noticed that the difference in angles started to decrease the further back we go in time. Here, he started to question whether the age of the pyramids was accurate or not. But to find the answer to that question, he began to ask himself how the age of Egyptian civilization was determined in the first place. He started looking for answers in books and references. Champollion, who established the rules for deciphering hieroglyphics, believed that the beginning of Egyptian civilization in its known form was with the first dynasty in 5867 BC. Then the German scholar Karl Lepsius moved it to 3892 BC. Auguste Mariette, the founder of the Egyptian Museum, pushed it back to 5400 BC, while his colleague Dr. Brocksch set it at 4400 BC. In the end, the date of around 3200 BC has become the one that most archaeologists currently accept as the established date for the beginning of Egyptian civilization, marked by the unification of the two kingdoms under King Menes Narmer, the founder of the first dynasty. There are many details, but in general it is a mixture of understanding the biblical and evangelical texts about the years of rule and the ages of kings and prophets, and personal guesses and estimates that differ from one to another. To this day, there is still a discrepancy in the numbers between the references. Therefore, in foreign sources, they always put the letter C or CA before the year, an abbreviation for the word circus, meaning that this date is approximate, meaning not exact. This is because there is no single stamp driver that we can rely on for dates, but rather all of them are probabilities, and each book supports an opinion other than the other. The question now is, did the ancient Egyptians leave us a special driver for the age of civilization? In the Egyptian manuscript in the city of Turin, in Italy, there is one of the most important papyri that was obtained by an Italian traveler named Drovetti in the early 19th century. Unfortunately, the papyrus is damaged, and we don't know for sure whether it was damaged before or after its discovery. The papyrus contains more than 340 names of Egyptian kings, with the number of years they ruled listed under each name, starting with a period called the Age of the Gods, which spans 7,000 years. Until now, it's not clear what the Age of the Gods means, and what exactly is meant by the gods. If this papyrus were intact, it would be the most important document chronicling Egyptian history. Commenting on this papyrus, Dr. Salim Hassan wrote in the Encyclopedia of Egyptian Civilization that the papyrus mentioned a large number of unknown kings, meaning kings about whom we know nothing. Herodotus, who quoted the priests of Egypt, stated that 340 kings ruled for 11,340 years. Pay attention to that number. 11,340 years, pay attention to that number. The second record we have that records the age of civilization came to us from Manetho of Seminary, a highly educated Egyptian historian who was asked by Ptolemy II to write and compile the history of ancient Egypt. At that time, the historian Manetho used the record and registers found in the Egyptian temples. Unfortunately, the original copy of Manetho's book was lost forever in the fire of the Alexandria Library in the Roman era. But fortunately, some historians have quoted excerpts from Marathon's writings. Among the things these historians have quoted is that his division and classification of the kings of Egyptian civilization does not only go back 3,000 years, but it goes back nearly 30,000 years. The historian Eusebius of Caesarea reported that Manetho mentioned 3 periods before the era of the dynasties, which some mistakenly call the pharaonic period, but the correct term is the era of the dynasties. These 3 periods are the revered ones: the son of Horus or the father of Horus, and the kings of the era, totaling 28,000 years. Eusebius even questioned Manetho's account, due to the enormity of the number, suggesting that he must have meant 28,000 months, not years. In the account of the historian Diodorus Siculus, another historian who quoted Manetho, he stated that there were 33,000 years before King Menes, meaning that the total age of Egyptian civilization, according to Diodorus, reaches 36,000 years. Other historians have reported similar accounts with estimates in the tens of thousands. So, if we look at the timeline of Egyptian history from the birth of Christ before the Roman era, before the Ptolemaic period, there was the era of the dynasties, and before that, there were a number of cultures and communities that lived scattered without a central state, like Nakada, Badari, and Gerze. And before that, it's supposed to be a prehistoric stage, and we don't know anything about it. kings of the era of the venerable and the era of the gods of unknown eras and ages of Egyptian history are ignored, as if they do not exist. And as we saw this papyrus mentioned by the balanced scholars Dr. Salim Hassan and Dr. Ahmed Fakhri, and many others, we are not talking about a quick and unknown papyrus, but when they mention it, they do not explain who lived in these eras, what were their achievements, and where did they go. They mention it as abstract information. So now there is a contradiction between the numbers of Melton and the Turin Papyrus on the one hand, and the numbers in current history books, which estimate the Egyptian civilization in 3,000 years, but they attribute all the monuments, such as the pyramids, statues, temples, and others, to the era of the dynasty only. There is no doubt that the current numbers that we took from European scholars 200 years ago were subject to religious tendencies, meaning that the age of civilization could not have exceeded 6,000 years, which is the age of humanity according to the biblical narrative. If there is a difference from what they quoted from Menton due to an oversight in the transmission, or expressing a personal opinion or a different calendar, but there is no doubt that there are entire eras of Egyptian history that we still do not know anything about, and that the age of civilization is not only 3,000 years, but is estimated at tens of thousands of years. All this information was in front of Robert Bovell while he was thinking about the age of the pyramids, so it is clear that determining the age of Egyptian civilization as a whole was not based on solid stories. Our understanding of Egyptian civilization has been limited to just the dynastic period, or a little before it, so it's very possible that the pyramids are older than 2500 BC. And that's why the alignment didn't match and the angle of deviation is significant. Orion doesn't align with the pyramids. Let's go back to the program and try to go back in time. We'll go back to 3500 BC. Before that, the pyramids of Giza are exactly in the south, and we will start to go back. The alignment of the Giza pyramids with Orion at an angle of 45 degrees to the horizon and the Nile River is aligned with the Milky Way at an angle of 9 degrees, but the date is 2500 BC. 2500 BC is the first time that the Giza pyramids and the Orion star matched at the same angles. At the time of this experiment, his friend Graham Hancock was with him and said to him, "They attacked us just because we said there was a relationship between the pyramids and the Orion stars. But if we said the pyramids were 10,000 years old, what would they do to us? Maybe there is a problem with this program. Maybe. Well, this is another program. They brought another program that came up with the same result. This is a third program that came up with the same result. Oh, it was 10500 BC. So the pyramid girls recorded the age of the pyramids themselves in the engineering of construction, in a way that is not subject to love or loss, of course, by all standards of this discovery. This could rewrite Egyptian history again, because it brought back the age of Egyptian civilization before its officially dated age by thousands of years. The pyramid girls are not necessarily from the era of the dynasties, but it could be that Egyptian wisdom is much older than them, and that the era of these dynasties, exactly like ours, was born if the pyramids existed. This is another topic by Bukhtar. The first time that the alignment of the Orion system and the Giza pyramids between the Milky Way and the Nile River occurred was in the year 10,500 BC, and it is very logical that this is the real age that is most important. In 1994, Robert Bovell published his theory in the book The Orion Mystery, which caused a huge stir at the time and quickly made his book one of the best-selling books in England. However, academic Egyptologists rejected the theory and refused to even discuss it, accusing Robert Bovell of being ignorant, fame-seeking, and fond of fantasy. In several television programs, Dr. Zahi Hawass even refused to entertain the theory, dismissing its details, and attacking the theorist, claiming that reading the book was fundamentally unnecessary.
Dr. Hawass, you should confirm that the topic of the pyramids is similar to the topic of the heavens of Orion. It's a plan, it's French. The man doesn't simply base his idea on any archaeological or psychological evidence. The man is profound. Archaeological furniture or psychological furniture, the man is profound. He should go to study at a children's school, but he can't steal on the trains. Tell me about his way, about his management. What kind of management does he have? English? I don't think he will ever be able to manage. I don't think so.
Haven't you read the Orion Theater or the Genesis car? I won't waste my time.
I am a man, I am scientific.
We respect Dr. Zahi Hawass and his significant academic stature, but how can we criticize a book without reading it? The truth is, we've lost a lot by not discussing this theory, and the issue has shifted from an academic disagreement to a personal conflict. I don't know of any book in Arabic that talks about this theory, except for one book, which is by Professor Antoine Boutros, titled The Great Conspiracy. If anyone wants to learn more details about the theory, I recommend reading this book. Professor Antoine Boutros says that the rejection of the theory by Egyptologists was for two main reasons. First, it is well known that Egyptologists agree that the pyramids are part of a religious belief connected to the sun. The pyramids represent the rays of the sun, and the pyramids are like launch pads that guide the king on his way to the sun to join his shepherds on his journey, which also takes place in the middle of the sun boats. The pyramids are built west of the Nile Valley, meaning towards the setting sun, the symbol of death, so everything superficially suggests the connection of the pyramids and their connection to the sun. But Rob Alboville's theory proves the connection of the pyramids to the stars, and that the pyramids were built west of the Nile Valley, not for sunset, but because they are a reward for stars located west of the sunset, and that the daughters of the pyramids are the owners of a stellar belief, not a solar one, and this weakens the possibility that the Basra era is the daughters of the pyramids. Secondly, Bouval's theory dates the age of the pyramids back to 10,000 years BC, and thus his theory almost demolishes Egyptology, which has been limited in the last 200 years. In references, publications, media, recordings, and research, it will be reconsidered not only in Egyptian history, but in the history of the whole world. As we saw from what was transmitted from Manetho, there was an Egyptian era that existed thousands of years before the era of the dynasties, and it was mentioned very well that the daughters of the pyramids were from one of their eras. They could be venerated or a sorcerer who are followers of Kors or any other era. Why don't we rely on carbon-14 to know the age of the pyramids? We are in the year of the method of knowing the age of matter through carbon-14. It was discovered in the orbs and is used to estimate the age of fossils. Carbon-14 dating depends in its measurement on the presence of organic matter, but organic matter is necessary. This organic matter could be bone or hair from a mummy. It could be wood. It could be food remains. Well, suppose there is no organic matter, then we will not know the currency of the thing. Therefore, when a measurement of bicarbonate 17 is made, the measurement is not made on the rock itself, but rather they search for any organic locations around the thing that they are measuring. We return to the words of Dr. Mark Lehner, one of the most famous Egyptologists, in a long dialogue on his website about the measurement of bicarbonate 17. Mark Lehner is a supporter of the idea that the pyramids were built in the age of prescriptions in 2500 BC. Dr. Mark Lehner said, "First, there is no easy, reliable way to know the age of the pyramids, including carbon-14. Second, when they wanted to know the date of the pyramids with radioactive carbon, what did they do? Also, the sun angels, which are made of wood, which is an organic material. Also, the honorary vessels around the pyramid, which had the remains of dried food, which is also an organic material. Also, the remains of burnt wood, which were found stuck between the stones of the pyramid. But the stones of the pyramid itself are made of quarry rock. It is not suitable for Neso. The solar boats, or the pottery vessels, or the organic remains around them provided dates roughly between 2500 and 3000 BC, because the pyramids went through different eras, and the items found, including the workers' graves, could be from thousands of years after the pyramids were built. This doesn't prove that they belong to the era of the pyramids. In the Nubian Museum in Aswan, there is a strange artifact. This is an ostrich egg dating back to the Naqada period, approximately 4500 years BC. This egg was discovered in 1907 in one of the tombs. If we look at the drawings on it, we will find a depiction of three pyramids similar to the pyramids of Giza and a river like the Nile. If you look at the pyramids of Giza from the south, you will find that the three are indeed west of the Nile Valley, and that their arrangement from largest to smallest is exactly like the one on the egg. We will also find that the Nile River depicted on the egg is narrow in the north and wide in the south, which are the same characteristics of the Nile basin. The official explanatory plaque in the museum states that it is 4500 years old BC. The official opinion states that this drawing does not represent the pyramids of Giza and that it is just a coincidence. In fact, I found other people, both experts and amateurs, who noticed the same observations. It was also written that this blessing egg is another piece of evidence that the age of the pyramids is older than the age of the monument itself. We saw Bauval's astronomical theory, we saw the Turin papyrus, we saw Manetho's words, and we saw the ostrich egg. There are many other pieces of evidence that we haven't mentioned to keep the time from extending further, but we will discuss them in future episodes. All of these are pieces of evidence that push back the age of the pyramids and the age of Egyptian civilization in general by thousands of years more than their actual age. Despite the widespread acceptance of the theory and the conviction of millions of people around the world, it is still officially rejected. This means that when King Menes Narmer unified the two kingdoms and began his era around 3200 BC, the pyramids were already in existence for thousands of years. See you in the next episode, God willing.